Ready to go? The July 23rd regular meeting of the Park Township Planning Commission is now in session. First item on the agenda is staff to call to order. Is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or additions they would like to make?
Motion to accept as is.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed. Second item is the approval of minutes from June 25th. I had one correction on page 3, and it was one thing I said, so I remembered it. That had to do with the election of officers. I think, I may have said would serve, but I meant to say willing to serve. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph down. Talking about the different roles and the fact that stated that Commissioner Green would serve and would be willing to serve. I don't need the decisions. I was just letting folks know who is willing to do. That's the only one I have. No approval with the amendment?
No, I have.
Oh, you got one.
My preamble, I always try to read these minutes 5 years from now, and somebody's trying to figure out how we can do it. So on page 3, under item 7, the last sentence in the paragraph starts twice. We say on page 12, language is added to clarify what would be evaluated in looking at safety areas for driving facilities. We clarified that these were not official standards. My question is, what are they? If it's not official, are they suggested? Are they? Anybody recall? Maybe Mika. Mika.
Yes.
Yes, on page 3 of the minutes. Item 7, the large paragraph that starts with your name. When you said, or you clarified that these were not official standards, what were they?
For the stacking areas.
Yeah, were they suggested standards or industry standards?
Context. Yeah, I was just telling Runner, I left the minutes in my office, but I won't.
You see that item?
Yeah.
Sounds like adopted, it's going to be official.
I think we should maybe just strike that sentence. My recollection is that, there's not we weren't saying based on this criteria, this criteria, this criteria, this criteria, which is usually what kind of the official standards would look like. It's more, you can look at what a particular, like if there's a restaurant that is known, Chick-fil-A is known for having eating more staff in the area, that's something the planning commission. So that was the intent of it, as opposed to.
So this is language in the C2 ordinance.
Correct.
That we approve.
Yes, yeah.
Those were like the guidelines.
So
Yeah.
That's why I just did we guidelines suggest that we're not a the ordinance required.
Right, so I think that the ordinance, if I remember correctly, required 7 static spaces and then said there was planning commission discretion. And it's based on that variability between what the needs are between those different types of facilities. I really didn't find any comparative ordinances when I was looking at places that said, based on this and this and this and this and this, maybe it's out there, but I didn't find it. There's usually a little bit more discretion, so.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Any other changes or corrections? With that, Have a motion to approve this amendment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Very good, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is public comment. Go ahead and open public comment now. And if you would, please, introduce yourself, where you're from. Yeah, thanks.
Good evening, my name is Sarah Wilson Wassenaar, and I'm the co-owner of 17330 Ryder Street. About 5 years ago, my extended family and I watched the wooded property surrounding our historic family cottage change dramatically. The loss of mature tree canopy has affected not only the beauty and enjoyment of our property, but ultimately its ecological health. Whether people think about trees in terms of shade, wildlife, privacy, or property values, mature tree canopy is one of Park Township's defining assets, second only to our beautiful Lake Michigan. I don't share my family's story to assign the blame, but because it became a case study that led me to ask a deeper question. How can we create better incentives so future development works with existing landscape? Pondering that question over several years led me to something that I put together called the Tree Mitigation Fund. The idea is simple: align financial incentives with the long-term health of the community while creating a practical framework based on 3 objective factors: tree size, species, and local context. Larger trees provide greater public health and ecological benefits. Native species contribute more to the local ecosystem, and a tree within an intact woodland is part of a larger living system whose benefits and whose loss extend beyond property lines, which is evident in my family's story. The goal is not to stop development, but to ensure that Park Township, as it grows, continues to protect the natural systems that define its identity and support its long-term development. Recent wildfire smoke reminded many of us that clean air cannot be taken for granted. Here in West Michigan, we also understand that healthy landscapes and healthy watersheds are inseparable from the future of Lake Michigan. Mature tree canopy quietly supports both. Something like a tree mitigation fund would encourage building permit applicants to preserve existing forests, adjust building footprints, reconsider optional site amenities, and work with the landscape instead of against it. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions after.
Thank you very much. I'm just gonna, typically won't respond, but in this case, since that's one of the items on our agenda tonight, is to work further on the tree preservation ordinance. I appreciate your input and your comments, and would like to learn more about what your kind of some of the context about it. How you're thinking about this, because we're doing the same thing right now and trying to make sure that we come up with the best plan that we can to be able to recognizing, developing our communities, agriculture, that everything needs to coexist.
Absolutely.
So thank you. There's no one on this side, so I'll ask if anyone on this side from a public comment perspective. Nope. In that case, I'll move into close public comment. We have a great opportunity. Thank you very much. We have a great opportunity for some education as we go forward. I think as long as we've been doing this and it varies across the place, every time we have a new site plan, in this case, a preliminary plan presented, we learn, and we also had a couple of members in the second meeting on the planning commission. And I think I asked Nico, we actually talked about using this as an opportunity to talk about planned unit developments, what they are, what the process is to get those in place. And what the accommodation should be around doing this. Really, what's the focus? Why do they exist? Why are they very popular in Park Township in terms of some of the developments we're seeing? So maybe if you could kind of walk us through that, that would be great.
You know, doing planned unit development first for those who are newer to the, kind of doing things a little bit backwards, because you're doing the thing that has the more flexibility built in, it's kind of like extra rather than starting with the more foundational stuff. So the foundational stuff when you're looking at, the development is just, you're going with a strict zoning ordinance. So, everything that's in the ordinance is exactly what you get in. So that means the primary things that tends to reflect are the lot size and the house size in those areas. So if you're building in the R3 district, all of your lots will be at least 15,000 square feet. They're going to be 85 feet wide. It's just going to be kind of a very straight approval. So you saw that recently with the Trillium Grove. That was a site plan development. So just very, you're very checking the box. A planned unit development is intended to allow more creativity to the developer, allow them more flexibility to do things that they wouldn't be able to straight zoning ordinance. Now, in exchange for that, there's meant to be a public benefit, which doesn't necessarily mean an amenity specifically for the public. It doesn't mean like they have to provide a swing set for the neighbors or something like that, although that's allowed. But it just means there has to be something there that's beneficial that you wouldn't otherwise see if you were doing something under the straight zoning ordinance. So that's the purpose of it. I will read the purpose from the ordinance just to kind of ground ourselves in what this looks like in Park Township. Before that, so in Park Township, we typically, because it's such a residential community, we usually see residential PUDs. They can be mixed use and they can be mixed use. Park Township as well, the ordinance says it can be a mix of uses. So that is permitted. It's part of that exchange that happens in the course of the PUD approval. So according to section 363, the purpose of planned unit development regulations is to encourage and allow more creative and innovative design of planned development and use that is possible under conventional zoning district regulations. Planned unit developments are intended to allow flexibility in planning and in design of development proposals, which ideally results in a development that contains more amenities through the preservation of natural and cultural resources and through providing a combination of complementary uses. The result is ultimately a development that is more desirable than one produced in accordance with conventional zoning ordinance and subdivision controls. Through proper design and review, each PUD should substantially meet the following objectives: to allow a mix of uses, structures, facilities, housing types, and open space that is compatible with the existing and planned uses on nearby properties. To encourage land development that to the greatest extent possible preserves natural vegetation, respects natural topographic conditions, and preserves natural resources such as wetlands, forests, floodplains, and so forth. To provide for the regulation of lawful and reasonable land uses not otherwise authorized within this chapter. To provide for single or mixed use developments which respect the goals and objectives of this chapter in the Park Township Master Plan. To encourage the provision of open space and the development of recreational and other support facilities in generally central locations or within a reasonable distance of all dwellings and uses. And to implement the vision of the Park Township Master Plan in order to provide a high standard of quality of life, varied housing options, and richness of natural assets. So the main thing that's different with the planned unit development is that you're looking at all of the standards and saying some of these we're going to shift in order to allow for more creativity. So in the development that's coming up, there's some changes to side setbacks, for example, they'll allow them to be closer together than they would be in other developments. Sometimes the one thing that I'll say about a planned unit development specific to Park Township, when it comes to underlying density, you can do this in different ways. You can either have the PUD really completely replace the underlying zoning district or have it function more as an overlay district. So the underlying zoning doesn't completely disappear. Park Township functions more as an overlay district in that the underlying density of the parcel is maintained. So if you can have 20 houses on a parcel, if you were to do it as a straight site condominium or as a plat, then you can have 20 houses on that parcel. And no more than 20 houses on that parcel under the PUD. The difference is that you can reallocate it. So if you are normally able to have 20 houses each on 15,000 square foot parcels, you might say, we'll let you have 20 houses on 8,500 square foot parcels. And then you have room to do some other things on the parcel as well. So, but in Park Township, which is not the same everywhere, that underlying density is the thing that can't be overridden. That still is maintained. Process wise, I did include kind of the flow chart of what things look like for an applicant for the planned unit development. Before they come here, they meet with us, they meet with staff, we talk the plan through with them. Often changes are made. We have a standing review committee that consists of all the engineering and utilities, outside agencies that we work with, fire and building, normally all there. And they offer feedback on the plan before it even comes here. They were here for a preliminary look, which is the last meeting, which is optional, but they did that at the last meeting, or 2 meetings ago in the past, thank you. And then this is a preliminary PUD. The point of this meeting is to offer feedback and say, okay, there are some changes that we want to see in this or whatever it is, but to offer feedback before they come from the final PUD review. After the final PUD review, that goes to the township board, and the township board is the ultimate approving authority for the unit development. Once it gets through the township board approval, they still have a lot of work to do with other agencies, getting other entitlements as well. So I want to say it's usually, they can confirm this, but it's usually a good 6 months afterwards, at least, before we have a pre-con meeting and things really growing on the element side of things, like on the actual working road side. So it's a pretty long process.
Very good, thank you. Any immediate questions for Rika before we go to our next agenda item, which is the presentation of the preliminary PUD for 370? All right, thanks, Nika. With that, we'll move on to
Actually, are there any other specifics you want to provide in terms of the plan? For the current community that's being presented, I know you provided us with some comments and some.
Yep, I mean, I think everything is in the memo. It's relatively, it's really straightforward. I think the applicant wants.
perfect. Fire away.
Good evening. That should be a familiar face by now. I'm Sean Floyd, here on behalf of the applicants, building company. I see a few new faces on the planning commission, so welcome. The rest of the group sort of had benefit of having us come in. So there's 2 meetings to go. Do the pre-application applicants to get feedback on our initial plan. We always appreciate, it's always good sort of healthy discussion. I think that we always get a better plan because of it, right? I think that dialogue is very important. So maybe just for a little bit of background, some basics, just to make sure that the commission members who haven't there's been a benefit of being there, I can go over some of the basics. And forgive me, it's been a long week, I wish I had a better follow-up presentation for you tonight. I'm also going to answer your questions. So we came to this planning commission, which was actually several years ago, it was in 2023. And this property was rezoned to R5, okay, to high density residential. Called for in the master plan as the highest density residential use in all of our township. There's a few scattered areas in the master plan. There's some areas that are called out for the highest density residential. And it sort of makes sense to us anyway that this site would be that because the high school is right across the street. I mean, just a stone's throw away. So it stands to reason that it would be called for the master plan to the highest density residential. Therefore, we had a rezone from agriculture to the R5 zoning district. Over those years, there were a lot of different iterations of the plan, a lot of different concepts that were sort of put together by our sort of development team. Because these things take time, right? There's challenges on every site, and this site had no shortage of challenges, right? There, from topography, to the existing tree canopy and all that kind of stuff, and making the numbers work and all that. But we took our time, and we wanted to make sure to do it right. We think that spending that time before we came to you, led to a good plan. We had some initial plans that you may have noticed if you looked at the existing site, an existing house, right? Hearing feedback from some very initial discussions with the design team of staff here at our township. We revised that plan. Now you see that the house is gone. In calculating the density of the overall site, though, as Katie was just talking about in the ordinance, how it's based on the underlying zoning, what we would be allowed on this site is something in the neighborhood of 51, 52 residential sites. On this site, we're asking for 30, 30 of the townhome unit, or the condominium units that you see, plus the one single family home, which abuts the 148. So we're significantly less than what would be allowed on the site, and there's several reasons for that. But again, it being sort of the smallish site that it is, there's a lot of infrastructure that we need to get put in place on a site. So the biggest of which is always going to be stormwater detention. We need to maintain stormwater detention. We need to go through the engineering reviews that I mentioned as well. That is post entitlement, post planning commission, post township board approval for the site plan. We need to have engineering reviews by the township engineer, water resource commissioner, everybody, all the engineering reviews that we need to go through. The biggest one from a site design standpoint that has an impact on the site is stormwater detention. So that's why you see that as a large area on the site. However, we have an opportunity with those areas as well. This is a dry basin, okay? So 90% of the time, let's get it into drainage quickly. So what we try to do in that circumstance is really encourage that to be used as open space, and it's allowed for in the ordinance. And that was part of the discussion that we had with this group a few months ago, was that is an opportunity in that area for what we will call sort of passive open space, right? Passive recreation space, unprogrammed recreation space, right? So with 30 units, it's not the type of site that you want to, build a program. We'll say, recreation space, a playground, equipment, things like that, just wouldn't feel right on this type of site. And we talked about a lot of the opportunities to be able to use that space for dog walking or run football or just sort of kind of generally enjoying the outdoors. We talked about the ticks, and I don't know that we have any great solutions about that, other than to say, maintenance of that area is going to be important, and the association is responsible for doing that. But keeping it mowed down and keeping it, at a sort of a moderate level of growth, I think should discourage ticks. But so there's a couple things on that as we get into some of the notes of the review that I want to touch base on, but just trying to give you the overall sort of sense of how we came up with the design on this site. One of the other things that we have engaged with is with the road commission. There was a request from the staff when we met with them early on to relocate the drive entrance to where you see it now. That has been reviewed and approved in concept from the road commission. They've been great partners on this project. So we're fairly confident that that is a road location that will work, it will fit, and we'd like to proceed with that as shown. Touching base briefly again on the idea of a PUD. So there's really only a couple of reasons why this even needs to be, right? Number one, it's a private road. A public road just wouldn't make sense on this type of site. The way that your ordinance is written, it basically says, if you're gonna do a private road, it has to be within a PUD. That's sort of more or less what your ordinance says. So that's one reason. There's a couple of little dimensional, standards that, you know, we need relief on, and mostly it's that side yard setback. As Mika said, though, what that does is gives us an opportunity to, we'll say, cluster our buildings a little bit closer, get them that much, more compact, so that we have less impact on trees, open space, and that sort of thing. And we think that that really gets to the intent of what a PUD is for. You know, another definition that I've heard of a PUD, and I don't think that it's specifically what's in your ordinance, but I like the way that it describes it, is because of zoning ordinances, strict and rigid nature. Okay, so with zoning, it's very specific, right? A lot of words like will and shall, and you must do this, and very specific dimensions. It says you must meet this, and if you don't, you're sort of screwed, right? What a PUD allows you to do is say, because those strict requirements don't really fit on this site, they're not appropriate in every single situation. PUD allows you to take another path. And that path is relief from some dimensional standards. But it's also a back and forth where we can have a discussion about what do you like about this? Do you like the road location? Do you like, you know, how we're going to use the open space? Do you like, you know, the amount of tree preservation that we're doing? So, so we appreciate that we can kind of have that back and forth to have a better product, and I think that we will in the end. Condos required to be serviced by water and sewer, we have that. So utilities should be all handled. So I guess I'd like to just transition into a few things that I saw in the review, that if you saw them as well, I want to address them, and make sure that we're kind of on the same page. The planning commission expressed concern for pedestrian safety on Martin. Crosswalk is now on the plan. So we talked last time whether or not a crosswalk could be included, and it is, and that also is supported by the road commission. We reached out to them, and they had no issue with it. So what you see on your plan now is a crosswalk for you know, anybody who really wants to get across to that pathway can do so legally now. But then, of course, if there's any students or frankly teachers, right? We talked about that last time, of who are potential residents in this neighborhood. Certainly, teachers at the school or students at the school probably would find this a great place to live, where they can just use the crosswalk and get to school. So we've included that on there, and that has obtained support from the road commission. Okay, so within the review, just a few things that I kind of wanted to just kind of meet head on. Under the, section 38-369, standards for dedicated open space. Staff noted that the planning commission may want to review with the applicant what other stormwater management alternatives were considered. So one of the things that we did early on is explore the idea of obtaining an outlet of our stormwater basin to the north and to the west. Okay, so there is some sort of culvert in that area, and I think it eventually makes its way west for some sort of drainage happens. However, the problem with that is that it's not a county drain, so we have really no right to connect to that. And again, that was a challenge for this site, because if we have no outlet, we then need to accommodate, they say, back-to-back 100-year storm events. It basically covers the size of the storm base. So unfortunately, right, I know the developer heard that they didn't have to do it, but we know what's coming when we go to those engineering reviews. They say, you have to accommodate back-to-back 100-year storm events. Your detention basin must be of a size that accommodates that. So we did explore other options. We really pushed for to have that outlet, but we weren't able to achieve that, so therefore, you see the stormwater basin size that it is. Now, of course, could it go in a different location? Yes, we moved that thing around so many different times that the developer's tired to get built. So, they probably don't want us to move it again. We think it's in the right spot now. And, again, we think that it can be really used for other purposes as well. That we already talked about. Okay. Within that same section, it does note a large portion of the dedicated open space has been graded to accommodate stormwater facilities. The planning commission may wish to discuss how much existing topography is practical to preserve on this site. Again, just a note that sort of holding to sort of engineering requirements, which causes grading that needs to happen. It's like you need to get things from point A to point B, whether it be sanitary sewer, which needs to flow downhill, same thing with stormwater. So we really, we've done our research on this site, on this project for this number of units, this length of road, this size of detention basin. Fortunately, there's some grading that does need to happen for the site, in order for us to achieve that. Further down on that same page, it notes that there is no pedestrian access planned in or through the open space, which the planning commission may wish to discuss. So it is true, we don't really know anything on the plan specifically, or there's no proposed sort of hardscape or anything that is, a built installation that is shown into the open space. What you do notice though is at that cul-de-sac, and this would be between buildings, between 20 and 21. There's sort of a natural kind of open area. You actually space those trees very strategically. They're about 40 feet apart, trunk to trunk, and about 20 within the canopy in. So that means you would have a 20-foot opening right there for you to. I always go to the dog walking. A lot of people have dogs these days. I have a dog. I look for spots that are sort of natural for it. That to me seems to be the most logical spot for people to enter into that area. We don't have anything necessarily built there. Now, in the other area, I suppose that people could be encouraged to walk beyond unit 30, up and around 30. That didn't feel comfortable for us. Really, we passing like behind somebody's unit right alongside. Certainly didn't want to show anything there. If they do that, it's one of those things that, neighborhood, they're going to take this thing over. They may say, or it may be informal, right? People just may go that way. And if nobody has a problem with it, fine. But what we think is leaving that up to the association and designing the site to allow for it probably makes the most sense rather than sort of forcing something where like a built path through there didn't seem appropriate. So we want to encourage it. We think it's a good idea, but we struggle to think that anything built is going to enhance it. It's really almost more a matter of design, right? Keeping that open area between those units. And there's a good distance between 20 and 21 to see that we think makes for comfortable access to that area. Okay. Further in the review, and this would be under the tree preservation. It's further on, almost on page 3 of tree preservation, page 10 of the book. The applicant has not presented a reforestation plan other than noting that street trees have planted on the landscape plan. This is where relief from ordinance requirements may be needed under the auspices of after the planning commission discusses what type of tree canopy is appropriate on the site. So one of the sort of paradoxes that we've run into when we've discussed this before is that with the tree calculation method that you were using previously, or that's in the ordinance, it would almost require you to take down more trees in order to plant the number of trees that you would be required to install. So we sort of, we've strived to maintain as many trees as possible on the site. We've included street trees, that we think enhances the neighborhood and think that, is a, sort of a reasonable replacement for what is lost. But there's nothing specific by way of a reforestation plan that we provided. We're certainly going to discuss it tonight. That was our approach to that. The PUD standards of approval, item page 12. There are no pedestrian walkways along the internal roadways, but this is probably appropriate for a lower volume roadway. Added pedestrian access between condominiums and 148, but the proposed design is wood mulch. Given that this is the only point of connectivity in a planning commission not indicated required, so this pathway should be paved and have a dedicated easement. So we understand the piece about dedicated easement by all means, ensuring that sort of perpetual access for folks makes sense. The paved part of it, we find strange, mostly because running equipment and paving that area is going to necessitate further tree removal. Okay, so what we imagined, a mulch pathway can sort of move with the land a bit, right? It can meander amongst the trees, whereas a pathway, a paved sidewalk would necessitate the removal of trees. Roots would be damaged nearby, there'd be some collateral damage with it. And it didn't seem to make sense. There would also be this, sidewalk within about 25 feet of single family residence that is likely to be placed there. But then also the slope of that area really particularly looking at. And all the way at 148th Avenue, this is where we had going back to see. And if you look at any of your sheets, you'll notice the topography of that area. It's extremely steep. And so in that area, there would certainly need to be stairs that would need to be constructed. There's just no way of getting really any path, paved or not, honestly. But maybe there was something that you could do for like a mulch path of grading it out or something. But you would be constructing these concrete steps that would just sort of end. There's no sidewalk on 148. If you do a Google Street View, it's a nice street, but there's nothing there for you to get to. So by all means, connectivity we think is a good thing, but this one in particular, we'd like you to reconsider whether or not a paved pathway there makes sense. It reduces the buffer to the property to the south. It reduces trees. It would necessitate staircase and then increase the responsibilities of the condo association, right? They're going to incur the dues to replace that or repair it. They may even expect that it be shoveled in winter time. So we thought that there could be some discussion about that. It didn't seem to make a ton of sense, but maybe there's something we're missing. Similarly, in the same window there, a sign path should be included along Butternut from the proposed driveway to the southern property line. So one thing that you notice in the right of way, almost right up to the road, is a heavy canopy of trees, right? A pathway would require the removal of those trees. What we understand is Butternut Road is actually one of the blanking on the term, the wildlife preservation, wildlife corridors, that we've been encouraged to maintain that heavy tree canopy. we think that it's good for our residents as well. So that one was a bit strange as to why that would be necessary. There's a fully built, quite nice, nice wide bike path on the other side of the street that goes for a long way north and a long way south. On this side, you would have, you know, 100-foot length of sidewalk that would just kind of end in nowhere, that's going to remove trees, and reduce that canopy that is sort of encouraged in that wildlife corridor, desired by the developer and subsequently any of the residents that would be living there. And adds to our canopy buffer area that, that we're required to have. So, we'd like to revisit that and see whether or not that really makes sense. I think a lot of people enjoy the path that's across the road, because that's in a much more logical location. This one would not be, and we just didn't see the need for it. So those were the things that I wanted to cover. Well, developer guys want to come up and say anything, that's fine. Otherwise, I can be here to answer questions. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you doing this project. Here to answer questions.
Great, thank you. What? Okay. I'll jump in with one. I can, might as well start with Pat. My thought on this, and I think you bring up a good point around needing, potentially needing to put in there and potentially damaging or needing to clear out additional trees. My thought on that is that since that is the only path that's going to be connected, it could be used for the sun as well. I think it's, and if it's mulch, it's also going to have to be pre-mulched. The homeowners association would have to figure out how to take care of that once it's in. And I would expect we probably, want to keep the edge of that as well. So my thought was as well that, having that paved would be the best option. I think you mentioned there's going to have to be stairs at the end of it, regardless if it's paved or if it's whatever the substrate is. And I drove by there today and I agree, there's a large berm right on 140. So I can see where that's going to be a challenge. But that's kind of my rationale for that. Decided I can ask for additional input or go into another topic.
So can I make one comment on the pathways?
Yeah, go ahead.
With the pathways, with both of them, the comment was that there's not really anything there, there's not anything connecting. And one of the things that we look at when we're evaluating these is that they're here for 100 years. And so when we're making connections right now, it's true, there's not much on 148. It's a cute little street, it's very quiet. It's not going to be quiet in 100 years, so we expect it. So that's kind of one of the things that we're looking at. Well, similar to the pathway extension on Butternut, it does seem silly right now. You're building a little bit of a path to nowhere. At some point, we would expect that the parcels out that would develop. It's a relatively busy street now with the high school traffic, so having people required to cross there down the line, again, we'll keep 30, 40, 50 years down the line. Well, that's what we're looking to build for, is for the community that's going to be here.
Right, and we do have an across 148 buckets, all zone ag. I think there's a small house across from the second from the bottom in that area, but the rest is all agriculture. So we don't know what that's going to be, but that could change or it could be.
Yeah, the future land use map in this area is all high density residential. Yeah.
And you did address stormwater detention. I guess my question on this one, and you mentioned, and I know that I think that the model for that is it's supposed to drain in 24 to 48 hours. It's not generally the model for storm yet. I guess I'm just trying to visualize how that space gets used, because you've got about I think it's about a 4-foot drop from the top of that down to where the lower level of that, and water runs downhill. Forces that, right? But I guess how is that space used? is it natural for people to kind of go into that area and, you know, walk dogs or throw footballs, as you mentioned in there? I'm just trying to visualize how some of those spaces may be used. There's a lot of, you know, we don't see that many driveways, so we see a lot of them that fill up quickly with water. I think one on 160th and James is an example. I know that wasn't meant to be driveways, but and I'll just throw this out for commentary on how that space is typically used.
I don't know that we have a lot of examples in the township because I think you really started to see these come up more when the outgrowth standards, when the standards on drainage changed, and that was relatively recently. So I think we have some under construction, we have some on our way, but I don't know how many dry basins we have right now to use as examples.
I can speak to that, not necessarily for developments in Park Township, but and actually I can think of one in White Oaks, behind the hardware. Not quite to this scale, but actually has a small area in the back of, I think, 2 or possibly 3 lots. That was kind of this similar type of deal, kind of a temporary, heavy rain spills on, dries down. That was actually in individual lots. And so those folks actually just, you know, landscaped it and put it in their yard like normal and just had to maintain, you know, that slope. We have this in a Holland Township community in New Zealand, same type of deal. It's a small area behind it, you know, behind some people's homes, and it's actually on their lot. And so they just treat it like normal. 4 feet sounds like a lot, but when you slope it, you know, it's actually a pretty, you know, pretty gradual, pretty gradual hill, I'll say. So it may not be as common in Park Township just because of the general areas have, you know, a lot of water and can kind of fill those ponds. But it is quite common in areas that can just be used like any normal green space. So,
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question based on that? Say, you used the word landscaping when you were describing other examples.
mm-hmm.
But in this plan, I see no landscaping, just grass. Someplace I've heard the term mold a couple of times a year. That's my big hang on.
Mhm.
And there's no landscaping, wildflowers, there's mold a couple of times a year. It just sounds sort of like a desolate spot to go and recreate.
Well, it's natural, I guess. I mean, I view it similar to, you know, if you're familiar with Howard Park, you know, the entrance off of Quincy over in Zealand. It's a pretty wide open field and paths mowed through the field for, you know, people walking, running, things like that. So there's lots of different options. I brought up landscaping, kind of manicured grass, because those were on individual people's yards, which again, that could happen here as well. You know, that's just some additional area that needs to be fertilized, irrigated, you know, and all of a sudden the desire for that affordability starts to go away as, you know, all that common area needs to be maintained. So it's not that it can't be, but again, I think of it as a, you know, as a natural, you know, a natural area with some paths mowed into it. So.
Well, I'm just thinking of the people who are backing up, and that's their view, and it's just a block of a large expanse of sameness. And to me, and I'm not talking, when I say landscaping, I'm not talking about trees and flowers and everything. But a dry retention pond, it is, let's see, what's the technical term? The swale,
Dry basin.
yeah, it was, but the other one, you went on the south side of the property, you used the term about it being infiltration swale. Infiltration swale are both retention ponds, infiltration swales, both operate hydrologic from the same.
My understanding is that there's as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the difference being the detention area, a larger one, is meant to capture as much of the site as possible. We're sort of channeling it there. That infiltration area, we differentiated only because it's just picking up those back houses there, 7 through 14. It's not meant to accommodate the entire site. That's the only reason we all of them.
Okay, well, an infiltration swale is the first step in a rain. What an opportunity to have a nice neighborhood. This is not an expensive process to have 2 or 3 rain gardens, the big one and the small one, just something to add a little color, some different texture, something to make it not a large empty mass of grass. I'd ask you to take that into consideration without massive landscaping bills. What did you do there to break it up a little in both areas?
Got it, understood. Thank you.
Okay.
It's a little hard to judge size on this, but look at it, the open space behind 19 and 20, the open space behind 15 and 16. I know you mentioned with 30 units, it's small to put in, a clubhouse or something like that. But do you have any thoughts around, especially between 19 and 20, considering you have that green area? Doing something that might be a, family amenity, whether it's picnic tables or play set or something like that in that area. So it looks like it's not huge, but it might be large enough to be able to accommodate some type of amenity.
And we're certainly not, most of that. Picnic area, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, look at open spaces and then how you use it. That's more, could be done into more of a way. I look out here and we have a lot of open space, we haven't figured out what to do. And I know there's gonna be great things eventually, but I think we're all anxious to see how that develops for what the next phases are. So even with that immediate, that smaller space, hopefully there's something creative. I know you guys are creative, so you come up with a lot of interesting ideas.
Yeah, but what's challenging with that is similar probably with the township has experienced. You ask 20 people and you get 20 different answers, and so now we just use this example, right? 30 people, 30 different answers. And so oftentimes, our attempt is to provide the space, but allow the community to materialize, because just when I think I've got a community figured out, it's located, near a school, and I'm thinking, man, this place is cool. It tends to be the hot destination for all the, retired empty nesters. Or vice versa, I've seen it another way too, going, oh man, this is gonna be a spot for, the empty nesters and the families come rolling in. And of course, everybody's gonna want, something a little different. So what we try to do is provide the space, and then as that association fills up, maybe 50%, certainly 75% if it's fully turned over to the homeowners, then they can have some say in it versus, this group here, which has fantastic opinions and ideas, and so do we, but not knowing exactly how that's going to materialize. Is that families? Is that, single? We don't know, and then that.
Yeah, to give it some consideration. I understand the challenge. Don't let it be going out the path without knowing who your owners are.
Yeah.
And I think something like picnic tables, right, would work for a wider variety of demographics, right? It's something families, retirees, something like, right, anyone could enjoy that, especially if you're also trying to make it a space where there is some level of recreation. So you want to sit on the bench and throw the dog a ball, right? You don't have to stand there. Just something that's a little bit more interesting, right? If it could work out, if you explore some sort of rain garden element that can be kind of cool if it fit in that side of that dry retention area, kind of adding a little, just I have a more interest, as kind of a interesting place to hang out compared to, you know, just the open kind of wild grassy fields, which we have to do.
But they're all really cute.
So I concur with your opinion in that once owners start moving in, they'll get a feel of traffic patterns, walking patterns, stuff like that. I mean, even when they put in universities, they wait 2 to 3 years and put the sidewalks in because they will watch where people walk and that's where they're gonna put the sidewalks. So, yeah, I agree with that. The road commission, going back to the crosswalk, is that just gonna be painted lines on the road, or is there gonna be a blinking light for traffic signaling that people are crossing, or is that not even discussed yet?
Well, the road commission, I will say approved, nothing is officially yet, is paint lines on the side.
Okay.
So would that be a developer request or a township request? If we know, because I think there's probably research. So. Looking less of it.
Yeah, and, I think there's more to be done like on the street, and there's gonna be some additional road width that's gonna be required for passing, turning, and things like that, and so that could come into it. We've also got the driveways for the school, they're close there, so, I don't know that I wanna speak to that. There are standards when it comes to distance. For the hawk signals, which is the ones that actually turn red, or for the RFBs, which are the blinking ones. So, and without looking at it and knowing what those future plans are, I wouldn't want to speak to it again.
Yeah, I was just more curious as to if there was conversation on that. Well, yeah, I really like that there's gonna be something.
I think you discussed it before, but, the commission, so I don't know if there's any more context.
My concern was with the crosswalk as well, but I think that might be a bigger discussion we might want to have at a later time, because I live near Plum Park, and they just put in the blinky light crosswalk. And I've seen how people behave there, and I'm really nervous. Because there seems to be a disconnect between what the pedestrian thinks is going to happen and what the motorist thinks is going to happen, and I'm afraid that that's gonna go badly when they miscommunicate at the wrong time. And so this is a similar situation with a busy road, and people are, you know, for as many years as it's been there, there's been no break in the traffic there. Similar to Barman's Public Park, it might be a wider discussion of how we can. I'm not against them necessarily, I just feel like we need to do some education or something in addition, just to make sure that the motorists and the pedestrians are all on the same page.
Yeah, but they have their crosswalks everywhere, it's really tricky. Generally, they improve safety for pedestrians, but it does, you know, sometimes people get the idea that because there's a crosswalk there, they have the right way to crosswalk. Somebody's going 50 miles an hour, and they'll just kind of cross the street, don't do that. They have to tell you, but it is really tricky, and trying to figure out what level of caution, and does that increase boldness of someone kind of just stepping into traffic in a way.
And that's what I saw, yeah, I'm not even looking both directions, you know, and I just get nervous.
The crosswalk on Beach Road, is down from the marina hardware store. But they moved it down there, but they have a little extra sign in the middle of the road that has very obviously been run over. But it's at a perfect angle, so.
It was budget for that.
It's certainly something to be considered. Like we were going down that way one morning and I'm like, let's try it. So hopefully it's just the sign, right, and not people, but. We can do our best, but we can't control, unfortunately, the motorists or the pedestrians.
I did see one comment in here about, road commission possibly requiring mulching, which potentially would impact the trees that are right. If you guys started to think about, you know, what a plan we might look like for that, it's obviously that is gonna be, we're back to trees again for it. That's a challenge. We don't know yet if that's gonna be a requirement. I don't know if you've heard more since the original plans have been put together.
No, our engineers looked at it and we struggled to see how that would actually work. We don't believe that the road commission is going to require any width change around the road. They very well might, we never know until we really engage with them and they don't get too much involved until. Stranger things have happened. We looked at it in some detail, with our engineering team and they didn't see it as likely and they didn't see how it would work because, essentially there already is kind of a center for left turn there, it's outlines out. So we're not too concerned about that, but, even if I don't have, I have to look at it again, but even if it did widen out, you'd be widening it out south, I suppose maybe there'd be a little bit of taper to the north, but I don't know that too many trees would be impacted. Would be using the pathway that's going in there, so perhaps it's an inevitability. We don't think that it's going to be required. Even if it was, I don't know how many trees would be impacted. And if we're required for the pathway to be impacted.
Speaking of the pathway there, I agree that it's kind of weird just to put it in X amount of feet and have it sit in place for 50 years. That whole area will be totally different by then as far as what else is built up around it. Well, obviously the same trees will never be there. They're gonna go through their life cycles as well. I just don't want to have heartburn about taking trees out to put a path in. And then perhaps if the side path gets developed on the inside of the road at some point, many years down the road, the association at that point takes it up.
Yeah, I suppose if I may, I would encourage this board to think of what is that standard? Is 50 years really going to be our standard? We think about that stuff. Then you have 50 years worth of a path to kind of nowhere that is going to need air replacements and all that every decade, right? So if 50 years is the standard, to me, that seems probably beyond what reasonable would tell us. I do think that there will be some sort of solution 50 years down the road, which would be levying some sort of tax on the association. Municipalities flush with cash at that point, and they put it in the county or whoever knows. But I think respectively, 50 years down the road, sure, that might be nice. Who knows what the world will look like.
Right, so it took me for half of 100 and then get out.
Well, and we're all speculating, right? But if we're talking in numbers of 50, if that's the standard, I think there's a lot of things that may be needed 50 years that are around there that I don't know that necessarily makes sense to be put in place, installed, maintained, looked at for however long it would be.
Yeah, my 2 cents is it sucks going first, right? But it is an area where the future land use is zoned for high density, right? And this was the first parcel that was rezoned for this purpose. I can't predict the future, but my guess is sooner rather than later, we might see additional parcels in that area potentially coming for requests for rezones, and I would bet sooner than 50 years. I would bet sooner than 25 years. I don't know, but again, given where we're encouraging future development based on our future land use map. And the type of developments that we expect to see based on our future land use. And just the fact that this is the first one that's made the switch from ag to high density, it does seem a little silly, but it also is probably more likely to happen sooner, right? And not doing it now is going to make it more difficult to leave the residents of this development left behind at a later time. That's kind of my gut feeling. I do have a question. For the single unit on 148th. And it only dawned on me when I was sitting here thinking, which side of the street will the mailbox be on? Will they have to cross the street?
What, like 140 Avenue address?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I mean, there's not a lot there, so I wasn't like thinking about it, right? But as we're thinking about safety and
No, it's in mailbox. There's houses on the west side of 148 now, right? Where's Google Maps tell us where their mailboxes?
the one who drove down there was not like, I don't know.
I guess
It never-
I agree,
never
that
registered.
describes one, and sometimes they have all on one side, but.
Was I watching that Lake Shore and they all crossed the street to their
Yeah, Lake Shore,
mailbox, so.
I don't think I'm 148.
It's not a lot on the list.
Let's
Sorry.
throw it out.
More just, but it was for thinking in general about just safety in overall, right? It's one unit, I get it, but. It dawned on me that I didn't pay attention to mailboxes.
That might make it Danny's original. Resolution's not good enough. Do some research though.
I actually did want to ask one question about, the single families going into lot one. Smart one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it looks like it's showing a tree buffer, but that's not being calculated as part of the tree buffer for, this development, correct? It looks like you've got a tree buffer, or a tree going kind of maybe a third of the way across that line. I'm looking at L100.
yeah. Yes, we are showing an existing tree canopy. We have it sort of stop there because that's like for the house. Okay, well, that sort of thing.
Okay. But that's not being part of the calculation of the tree buffer for this area. I would think we've got development. I mean, it should be with.
Well, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, there's a tree preservation.
Yes.
What do you got for that area?
Okay.
It is our PUD, they are trees, they are being preserved, so yes, we are calculating.
You are talking.
21%.
So on Google Maps, if I look at shadows, I think mailboxes are on this.
Florida did find one. Oh, it's on East.
Yes.
Can we go back to the mulch pad for a second? Because I had, because I had an idea. I think an easement with a path is important for the next 50 to 100 years, but I think having an easement that the easement reaches 148, but why not at this point in time, put in your mulch path, make a loop at the 148, then come back, sort of overlook. That's my concept, but, so the path is there, the easement's there, I wouldn't put in a stairway to nowhere, still nowhere below sun.
I like how you do that.
If you put any of the wait until something is there, whether it's wait till development is there, or wait until whatever is there, is that this development isn't gonna come back when that happens. And so, that's not gonna be something that the township can say, you know, we're gonna require the continuity at that point. That just is, it's kind of how you view, and
Even though we have the easement and the path that ends out of the foot.
yeah. Because we can't, again, we can't take ownership of that, so it's so owned, it's, the easement is for access. As a, you know, so everybody can walk on, but it's not something that the township owns, it's still owned by the PUD, by the neighbor. So that would be, I mean, their purview.
So why don't we just leave it up to them whether they want?
Well, because then you're leaving connectivity on the table, and that's one of the failures, that's one of the things that help a community, connect with itself.
So I know we're jumping around. a little bit. So that one section is in, the library, single family home, precinct homes. The intent then is that that's going to remain that section. Of the county.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously don't know pinpoint accurate where the house is going and everything, but most likely someone won't build their house that far back because they're getting back closer to
Right.
that other neighborhood, but they want it far back enough from a create, so. It's probably sort of.
And I
Like,
would think
direct
they're
it.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking right here, so there's gonna be home built here.
Chuck, I've got a couple of nuts and bolts questions. Consumers today has a clear cut easement that goes back to the house and delivers power to the current house that's on the property. But I don't see that easement on your layout. You know, you're quite freaking out where it is. I mean, it's on the existing,
Like the same division plan. And there's overhead lines there, right, they're probably there. A lot of times consumers will just forego that.
well, I was gonna ask if we were to fit.
Yeah.
And then will you replant it, because it's just we planted stumps right now.
Where?
And we went from butternut back to that house, back to the house. Where the line's drawn,
Are we missing trees? I mean, it's gonna be multiple.
there's nothing there right now except. I mean, if you're standing on butternut, you can see right down to all the way to the house, you can see the house.
I mean, yeah, if a few trees need to go in, now again, I think most of it's gonna be structured driveway, road.
That's why I'm talking about the close to butternut. Well, what I'm talking about is I couldn't go from there, I couldn't figure out where your driveway was going to be. Is it development on this original map? Is it? And I was wondering if you were perhaps using
Very close, very
Yeah.
close.
that line at your entrance to the property.
Yeah, in fact, I think it might be probably in line with the trees just to the south of road entrance. If you see at the road entrance, those, there's 3 or 4 trees.
I'd ask you to take a look at if your entrance driveway can be there, problem solved. If not, it's a pretty ugly gash.
Yeah, if a tree or two needs to get planted extra in there.
I actually think that's where our road's gonna be.
And that's what I was wondering.
I'm familiar where that is, so that was the first unit.
Yeah.
It's looking back and forth between my PDF. Number 5.
Never mind with minor detail, the association of landscape maintenance agreement will it require native species and plants are required. Avoid invasive solar things like that. Do I have anything? Yes.
See no problem.
Well, they refer to the right of the landscape agreement. Like that, and just like the native, non-invasive.
Yes. I can say with some confidence that that overhead line, red line, those trees to stop. I use my scale.
I like this overall comment, is I know why you want it to be a 20 unit bill. But our ordinance is very specific that a PUD has to have one or more of the following items to be the significant recognizable benefit township. And those three are recreational facilities or additional landscaping to preserve or enhance the views along the roadway. I should say and/or creation of lakes or ponds not designed solely to function as detention facilities. So the plan presented right now puts all your, I guess, approval for PUD on one that being that detention facility being a recreational facility. Because right now I don't see what you got 2 or 3, number 2 or number 3 covered. So.
Yes, sir.
One of those is required.
Understood.
Thank you.
The one, so right now, the ordinance has written, requires 25% replacement of trees that are removed. And obviously, this is very common with, the reason why we're working with tree preservation ordinance is because we started with that in the past, and I'm in that. But the replacement is pretty far below, what that replacement would be. And I think it's questionable whether it would be the new tree preservation requirement too. Now, since it's a PUD, you have more flexibility in that area. But I think that's probably something that you're gonna want to give some good discussion to, specifically because one of the things that's required of the PUD is that if there's something that's a departure from the ordinance, that's written into the PUD. So that's kind of a specific agreement, in that case to say, this is what that needs to look like. So, when I look at this, I see difficulty in keeping a lot of the trees that are there because you do need all the things that we've talked about before, the structures and the stormwater facilities and the utilities and whatnot. But there is replanting that can happen as well. And so I wonder if that would be good for the planning commission to start the discussion, or just general thoughts on what you would like tree preservation on this parcel to look like.
I think we get kind of caught up in numbers and percentages and that kind of thing. I think in a development like this, obviously it's a heavily wooded, a lot of trees are gonna be taken out. And to say, well, 25% have to be replaced, it's like, what and where? I think as long as, the whole construction process preserves as much of the natural landscape as they can. And then I'll say in tastefully add a canopy into the development where it's allowed and where it would do some benefit. I think that's kind of what I would like to see, rather than top numbers or percentage or something like that.
I would agree, when I see these developments, they often just put trees in the street, but we don't put any trees behind. Leave that up to the homeowner. I'm going back to this. I'll call it sameness again behind, for the retention pond. I would, love to see some trees surrounding plantings, not clumps, but plantings around that retention pond, and if they need to be wet-footed trees, that's fine. There's species that thrive in that sort of situation, but I'm just trying to give people looking out their back door something to see.
No, I would agree. I think being able to have some trees, along the back of those lot lines as well. And again, I don't think it's gotta be a bad ticket, but I think, providing some landscape, I guess, texture between the homes and the, retention. Stormwater. Makes a lot of sense.
Looking at the plan view on Google, and they've got plenty of trees to choose from. I mean, it is totally tree.
Oh, yeah, we grew through there today. A lot of, this is, and again, this is one of the challenges that, particularly for our more dense, development like this. I think everybody has heard the code commission, Elbro standards. And obviously we have tree preservation, which is in the works and modified now. One of the things we're gonna be incorporating into that is gonna be 20-year maturity of these trees. And I think it's gonna help the process in terms of what goes in and how much canopy that's gonna provide longer term. But yeah, I would agree. I think whatever we can do, there are a lot of trees to choose from. Construction and grading is gonna require a lot of those to be moved coming out. But I do think putting some of those along the back of the property lines between the stormwater detention area and those homes would make a lot of sense. So we could ask for that. I would.
So the proposed ordinance, the one that's in development, kind of in the draft form that it is right now, requires a certain percentage of canopy cover based on. I think we're talking about probably basing it on something like 20-year growth pattern. That's still under conversation. Is that something that you guys would like to see what that 20-year growth would look like on this site plan, or would you rather wait until that ordinance is further along? Again, the PUD, you have some flexibility.
Right. I would say for the final, well, timelines, we don't know, right? Will the final be, a couple months out? Will we finish the tree preservation ordinance over the next couple months? You're working with what you have today, right? I think it would be helpful, if there's a way to do that. I think there are 20-year maturity standards out there. They could show what the tree candidates would look like. We're talking about how we want it, which ones we might want to use to develop that. I think that would be helpful to the final board. Presentation, you can incorporate that. It'll help us to be able to look at the percentage base and see how that tracks against what we're talking. Any other questions from the applicants? Input, feedback? Good. Anything you guys have for us? No. Sure, Tom.
Well, I would just ask for a little bit of clarity on all what are like my path, because the challenge that I understand, right, everybody. Challenge is, we hear multiple things and then we come back and just like, I didn't do that. So, and again, I know it's tough, I don't know, but even just, provide some sort of, feedback to a majority of people with the mulch plan. Take that, You know, because otherwise we can hear different opinions and they don't really know, you know, is that one person, is that the commission? So, any clarity, I would think on kind of you know, the buttermilk sidewalk piece and the path, and again, I'll just reiterate, Sean mentioning this before, but you know, that paved path, all that topsoil has to come up to. That tree, this tree isn't in the path, the roots get damaged, they do kill trees. So we have this trees, and then it's like, but if they die, that's okay too. So, so just again, clarity on that would just be helpful for us to really come back with a good, robust plan. We feel like, you know, is going to be well received by the whole commission, not just a couple.
Okay, well, we're not gonna take a vote, but I'd love to get individual input. I think it's fair for finance, so, Dan, what's your thought?
Well, I was the guy over at Stablewood that wanted sidewalk from nowhere and I planned reading. But they had a specific purpose of trying to get us moving down the road towards that intersection, so people wouldn't be running family fair and get hit, so it's all the same reasons. This one, I'm not exactly sure where it would be headed to, or what point we are trying to make by asking for it there. That parcel is going, as has been shown, is heavily wooded. And so the trees that remain, the trees preserved, are going to have a rough few years getting used to their new climate. All of a sudden, wind they've never seen before is going to start coming into them. So I would lean in this situation against putting that extended sidewalk way back, whatever, through there.
Along better.
Along Butternut.
Okay.
On the mulch pad, I still think it's valuable to the association to have an easement along that one boundary line. At the minimum, because there's no easement for a path or connectivity or whatever it would be, then it becomes a moot point in the future. So that would be my input. I would at least like to have an easement protecting that. 25 foot is what I thought I heard, but along the southern boundary line of 148. I'm open here on what to put in it today, but I like the idea of having it there for the association to do something.
Can I make one statement about?
Sure.
I don't know what one of the partners. So I have kids renting a house for a year. I've been out on that property quite a bit. It's nature. It's trees, it's woods. And so when I think about the bad asphalt walkway going through there, it just doesn't make sense to me. Right, dog walks, you like the mulch, that's where you walk your dogs, right? You don't want concrete or asphalt. You're in an environment there that's natural, lots of trees. Walking through those woods are pretty nice because I think a mulch walk makes it a lot more peaceable than what that property gives. So that's just my opinion. So I just want to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Sure.
I've got a question on, how many roads in the township actually have side paths on both sides? Do we know?
Not very many, not very many.
And so on Butternut, there's no telling if we'll put one on both sides at some point.
Yeah, and that's kind of the question and the kind of the thinking. That some of these busier roads, there's not a plan right now, but as the township grows and grows in population, that's one of the things that will have to be a consideration is it's becoming too dangerous for people to cross. We're just talking about the difficulties of some of these crosswalks that are probably going to be areas where that's going to be required. Since it's right across from the school and since we're anticipating future development in the area, That's the thinking. But you're right, it doesn't, there's not, it's not a both sides in a lot of places. If it does happen later, then it is a township expense.
It doesn't make sense in my brain right now. I understand 100% the reaction. I don't know why we would have to know where we're at to this.
What about all campaign?
I probably go with mulch.
Thank you.
Yeah, so don't really see a purpose for the, path to nowhere on butternut. And, as far as paths going back, I mean, I wouldn't be objected to just cutting a few trees and having access just to the dirt trail run out there. I mean, you talk about nature, that's what it is. And I got a question, how many people are actually using it? If people are gonna walk or something like that, yeah, 148 isn't very heavily traffic, but you got the nice side path on the other side of the street rise. From out two directions, so, mulch if they have to, dirt if you can.
I'm gonna be the only one that thinks that it still makes sense if there's something to build development. Thinking specifically on other areas where it is heavily trafficked. Out of Beach Road, we don't have a lot. But after 168, as you continue to head west, there are sidewalks now on both sides that carry you all the way down, and it's due to the traffic. And I still think this is an area where there's going to be increased congestion and I think it makes sense if you're going first, but obviously I'm outnumbered, so doesn't change my opinion, but that's okay. As far as mulch or paved, I would go with the third option, some sort of crushed gravel, something that provides a defined, well-drained path, but would require slightly less maintenance than having to remulch every year, especially on the off chance of residents do use it relatively heavily. Realistically, that mulch is gonna degrade pretty quickly and it's just gonna be muddy and sloppy anyway. It does certainly still need maintenance, but I'm thinking about the paths that we have in some of our township parks, Lidstrom specifically, with that, kind of graded, I don't know the specific material, but the very tiny fine graded gravel with, a couple little edge rails to keep it semi-contained. I think kind of blends a little bit of both, but thinking about the long-term maintenance of the association, again, the gravel's gonna need maintenance, but certainly less than having to remulch it every year.
Good, thank you. Tony? I think the easement issue is important, for that house, the mulch, probably a solution. At this, with the easement, I think, for whatever would happen down the road, would very helpful, but the association have that access. In terms of the bottom issue, it seems probable that if another one or two high density areas go in, the first thing is going to be changing. Probably stoplights, more control of crossovers. You already have the existing path on the bottom of the other side of the street. So that might be the first iteration before you go to double sidewalk. So, just we can see how that plays out, but I think at that point that'd be more of a probable as the first step. That's it.
I'd say I'm neutral on the other path. I can see the benefits both ways. But I would be, more inclined to do a natural pathway to 148. The easement is an interesting idea. I know that, where 170th comes out to Lake Shore, there is a dirt path that has been problematic recently. I'm not exactly sure. We know some people that live in that area, and there's some, or there has been rumors of people thinking they own it when they don't, or they do when they didn't, or, so taking care of that, any kind of, uncertainty about who owns what. That would be a good idea, but I like the natural backup.
Well, I don't know if that helps, but I'll throw my two cents. I do think the easement, as far as the pathway under the grade, easements. I think we can start with, I like Stephanie's idea of having something semi-permeable. I'm also thinking about the latest for the homeowners association at the same time. They may decide they want something different in there after we put in, whether it's a mulch path or whether it's stone. So I would want to make it semi-permeable as opposed to, paving. So hopefully that's helpful. As far as I think what we heard in general, and I would agree, is that at this point in time, adding the additional, side path, on Butternut is probably not something. I think if, as again, we've heard, as more development takes shape, there's probably going to be additional things that we can work on as well. I think at that point. So. Okay.
Thanks for looking at it.
Thank you. Thanks for, you have the right to ask for clarity. So thanks. Thanks for that. All right. I think we're good. Does anybody need a break at this point? Okay. Motion to resign. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Brandon. All right, thank you.
You're taking a shot.
Need a motion to come back into the session.
So move.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next item on our agenda is to talk about tree canopies. So we, obviously made a lot of progress with this. Mika's done a lot of work on looking at a number of different options. And presenting those here, there's a lot of information here. I didn't pour through a lot of it. I got a couple of opinions, but I want to take us through, what's here and some of the choice points you might hear from us.
Yes. So I think the big thing in looking for is kind of a sense of what you want to see as far as canopy requirements in. Both percentage wise, I'm going to kind of look at those numbers again, and I'll tell you why I look at the numbers. And then also just in general how we're going to. So I think it was great to just have that conversation, looked at that, what is lots, some of you have been around other tree things, and we have in the past required tree surveys, looked at specific numbers of trees, kind of tree, and still we're very happy with the results. So try to figure out how we're going to find get to that happy place. I think is what's forward. One of the things, I think my favorite thing that's in your packet is this drawing right here. This is from Tigard, Oregon. I think they have a beautiful tree document. 85 pages on top of that.
It's in Oregon.
I think they might be bigger than us, I'm not sure. But one of the things that they had in their resources was this type of drawing, which they also have canopy cover requirement. Their canopy cover requirement is actually like 85%. For commercial areas over a period of time. Now, you can get one of the things that, and the numbers that we were looking at last time, and that is from, I think, the spreadsheet here. Included about how much area is taken up with the different elements during development. And so with the numbers that we have in your memo right now, that's based on kind of leftover. Okay, you've got your storm stuff in, and you've got your buildings in, and you've got your roads in, you've got your sanitary sewer in. So where can you put your trees? And kind of using that as a leftover. There is a certain amount of overlap that you can have though. I mean, your tree canopy can go over your road. You don't really want your roots in your sanitary sewer, but you can put trees into some of the drainage flows that they have. So thinking about, are these the right numbers? Into one of the things. Another thing is that I would like to, like your confirmation of requiring this as part of the development package, since we're looking at tree canopy today. Show us what your 20-year projected tree canopy is as part of your landscape plan. I don't think I don't think that would be terribly difficult to do, you know, it makes it a lot easier for, yeah.
Is that just plantings or is that current tree preservation? What's it gonna be?
Yeah, I would say probably that's a great thing for you to think about. I think it would be, I would probably lean towards saying what's currently there. Mark what's currently there and then plantings for 20 years, only because we've been trying to move away from tree survey because of, yeah, but.
Please not.
Okay. Okay. We've also got it here. This is from Virginia Tech, and it gives a, I think it gives a 20-year growth pattern for these trees. It's Michigan that we're in, and we're not Virginia, and so it would be different than that. I struggle. This is kind of where I'm running into. I think I'm gonna have to find a landscape architect because I'm having a hard time finding a chart that has that 20-year growth for trees in Michigan.
Yeah.
You would think so. It's got to be around somewhere. I just haven't been able to find that resource yet. So I'll keep digging. I didn't expect it to be. Well, fine.
But I'll say, this is adequate information, even trees
Yeah.
to estimate, because you start to see the genus, not just the particular species, the genus and what their normal ranges are, they're right all together. So if you're gonna put in an oak tree, this would be adequate information. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to get too fine grained.
But yeah, that we're trying to keep it simple.
Yes.
As simple as possible. Let's see, and I think those were the main items. There are experts, well, actually, no, I think we put the whole guide in, because not everybody is seeing it. So we've got the whole guide in, and this is kind of what we've been using as a guiding source, the tree selection species guide. And so you can see there where it shows what types of trees are desirable and are undesirable. This also has mature spread in it. That's one thing that we could also use as a calculation, but mature spread for some of the trees. Most places seem to be for 20. And then this was a mock-up that I did, I tried to make it to scale, but it's not measured. This is a clip from actually development that we had just looked at that showed, like planting size and 20-year size for what these would actually look like. Yeah, great. So, with that, maybe, are there general thoughts that you have, or we can kind of do see if we can start this up?
I'll try to show you think more of a range, there's the exhibit percentage. I think pretty ridiculous. Pick one hard number versus a range of animal protection.
Well, they can go past it as far as they want. So when you say.
I'm downside, I mean,
Yeah.
the upside of, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to check. Or what's that, the minimum?
I mean, we could call it a minimum, we're not asking them to hit it on the head, right?
There's numbers coming out.
Yeah, and it's a target, these are targets. Because you start with a lot of land, it's heavily wooded, and make a plan and put in plantings and there's a lot of, it's not guesswork. There's a lot of estimating going on from that point on of what would happen, what would be the mortality of the trees that are getting hit by wind that I talked about the numbers of. So I don't know about the range. I sort of like this is the standard upon which you must meet or surpass in your plan. You must deliver a plan to do that. My professional forester feedback.
I like that because I think it just makes it easier for future evaluation, here's our standard for zoning. Right, we're trying to make this more straightforward for the developers.
So whenever they
We
talk.
don't really want, I mean,
Okay.
we don't really want the range, like it is, here's the minimum. Yes, they can always go over, but you're right, it is also a target because we're basing it on future estimations, and our assumptions are that every tree planted is going to survive for 20 years as well, right? And it might
Can I wrote down 3 things to remember, sort of, as the opening thing. I might not know this, but our current township canopy is 53%. That is going to continue to grow. Trees will continue to grow, so that 53%, if we left it alone, would by this time in 100 years be 106%. But I think trying to establish a target, we have to know in the background that the trees they leave are going to continue to grow. They are not set in stone. Sometimes we forget that when we're reviewing plans. Second thing I wrote was we want housing development, need housing development. And then the third, the GIS calculation, the tree coverage was done very quickly and efficiently. And I'm guessing as we move through the couple of years of the tree ordinance, we're going to be able to get that done quickly and efficiently again. Don't you think so? We'll have a metric to see are we growing, are we receding, and we have to adjust these numbers. But in our conversations, I just want to keep those things in mind. It was a much easier number to get than I thought it would.
Amy, I just messaged, a friend of mine that I used to play hockey with, she's, Michigan's. No, she's an arborist, Michigan State University. Has one of the departments there, so I asked her for reference materials. Wonderful, so it was each year once.
Super. Well, she's a miller. No wonder. We're okay.
The thing that came to my mind, and actually just kind of while we were here, occurred to me that there's almost 2 things at play here. One is forests, so those are, existing groups of trees, versus tree plantings, which are more almost in the landscape side of things. So I would love for us to sort of figure out how to talk about both, preserving as much of the quote unquote forest as possible. But then also, when it's not possible, filling in with tree plantings. And we sort of alluded to it with this most recent piece, I think, because they were going to preserve a lot of the outside trees. So something like that.
Yes, yeah, it's street trees. I mean, there's a lot of elements that go into it, and we'll find as we start to put this into play that every development is going to be a little bit different. I do like the zoning, trying to do a zoning district. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, I just looking at some of these tools, this could be automated as a worksheet, and I think this could be really helpful for developers as they're coming in this work. I guess the other thing, from my staff standpoint, and maybe you and I talked about this, is how do we audit or do we validate once the plan's put together? Because essentially our role, once we review, recommend approval to the board, we're done, right? And so the board approves that they start developing. Is there going to be a need for some type of review of what's actually happening? On a couple of these, maybe in the beginning, just to see how this is working out. I don't know, I'm just, since a lot of this ends up on.
Yeah, we do site visits, so as things are under construction, if we see, we'll go through with our engineers as well. I think that pond doesn't look like I expected it to. And, we do layers on the building, depending on. For the trees. I've gone out and checked, I don't think we had a lot of trees that we leave, and the other ones we went out and checked to see, are the trees where they're supposed to be, did they leave the trees where they were supposed to? And they were all throughout, but, they've gone out and checked those, and so that's kind of what I would just doing in the future, that Trillium I was up there several times measuring.
Does somebody on staff approve the landscape plan, or is that planning commission?
Planning commission approves the landscape plan as part of the site plan approval. Yes, go ahead.
So, we have to be careful to put the responsibility on the developer to present a landscape plan to the planning commission and the numbers and calculations behind it. Not, here's where we want to put the trees, and we're not going to take it on and say, well, this came out to be 24%, 20%, or whatever. They have to, that's part of the presentation, right?
Oh, yes, yeah, they should be telling us what they plan to do.
And we're just gonna give you some tools to help them do
Great.
so.
Yeah, I think that's good. My question was, after we review it, we see the plan, it's laid out, is there going to be an intent or a process to be able to review what's actually done? And the only reason I bring that up, maybe that's not a long-term view, but this is a new process we're putting in place. New metrics to be able to provide that might be helpful just to see how this is working. Again, it's for flag, better way of putting it.
It's a little bit new, but it's similar to what we're doing before. It's not radically different. It's something we can check. When we get a plan, they'll provide their numbers, this is our area of open space, this is our area of trees, this is our, and if it's not a shape that I can easily calculate to double check, I'll have our engineers go and say, can you tell me what's the calculation? I did it for that last plan. What's the calculation of the 20% slope on that property? Because there's a different, it plays into the site plan differently. So we do the same thing with the trees. We can say, they say this is the canopy cover, and then we kind of go.
But it's our job to monitor what they're suggesting for planting.
Right, rather than saying, yeah, make it nice, and then just say, I only do that to be part of this.
It feels like this is a lot more prescriptive than anything we've had. And I think if we can, and to your point, and provide it to them so that it helps them. I mean, this working for California can be covered. You've got a lot of information on the different trees that would be the best fits. That there's a scale there, 0 to 10 in terms of which ones made the most sense in our geography. I mean, there's some great tools. I think there's probably a lot more in there, but I think there's a couple. So.
I also think it's good that our recommended canopy size is all less than their 53% today. It sort of signifies that we're not trying to make you, the developer, match the current state.
Right.
So I mean, I think it takes away one of those arguments. We're not trying to preserve the current state of the less than fully populated township. But that's also why I think it's important that we have, after a couple of years, the development's going in and do a GIS percentage again, just to know what's going on.
The other thing I like about having the recommended canopy size by zoning district, is that it also helps provide a little bit more specificity when we're looking at some site plans, right, like the one we just looked at that is very heavily wooded. And in order to do that development, we know inherently. But we are going to have other site plans that are current open ag, and they will be required to add additional trees, right? So it's being able to kind of provide that prescriptive total township balance in a way that it is consistently applied again by the zoning district instead of on a parcel by parcel basis, where in theory, it should end up balancing out across the total township. Instead of getting so hung up on individual parcels, because I know and understand, right, there's also a lot of community feedback. And some of us, even some of the applications that we've reviewed, we didn't necessarily feel great about because of that particular parcel. But being able to tie it back to something that has more structure and is holistically looking at the whole township instead of that individual parcel when we're making decisions, I think is important to drive that total township consistency, but also help us a little bit when we're looking, because we've spent so many hours discussing trees on so many previous developments. Right, and they're not all necessarily going to feel good, but feeling good about how we're managing as an entire township instead of on a plan by plan basis, I think is an important step. So we maybe spend a little less time getting quite so specific and granular. Particular trees, understanding that they are important, but we have a larger plan and vision that we can take consistent action against rather than, you know, site by site, plan by plan, and then just getting on.
No, it's a great point, and we really can't, we don't want to be arbitrary. You know, we looking at parcel by parcel and trying to evaluate what makes the most sense and how broad the buffer should be. And no, I think you're exactly right. I think the zone, the by zone piece makes a ton of sense. That provides us consistency. Most importantly, it provides the developers consistency.
And some tools.
And some tools. What else you got? You got?
Way faster than I expected, actually. But maybe, yeah, no, that's so maybe I can confirm, so options for Canada covered, we're talking about a 20-year growth in Michigan, and where you guys come. And we have the recommended canopy for different zone districts, like the idea of canopy for zone districts, and it sounds like you're happy with percentages that are established there. Right? And
Because they get us to our goals, but they're also reasonable.
yeah, and I hadn't thought of it. Okay, the undesirable species list is also in, I lost it. It's in the book. You comfortable with using this as undesirable species? So this was just published pretty recently, so I don't know how often it's updated. I think I would include language that had, you know, or otherwise than whatever right there. Okay.
Is that available, online? Somebody go there?
Very available.
So,
Yeah.
so as it's updated, it's updated online.
Yeah, one
So-
continues to be updated.
So the ordinance have that one quick,
Yeah,
other thing, use this. Right, okay.
hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully.
Undesirable seems so little. Thumb, right, so invasive.
Yeah, well, I think
Undesirable.
it's a little bit broader than invasive, but I think, and I'm gonna have to dig down, but I think that it was kind of specifically defined here as it's undesirable because of certain traits it has, it's like, invasive or nearly invasive, and things like that, it has kind of negative effects.
Or it's got disease, that have turned it from a native tree
Yeah,
to a former native tree.
Yeah, or like Scotch pine, I think might be there, but it isn't invasive, but it's.
And the trees in this list come after that one.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go back to the market.
Yeah.
There's a lot of numbers in my, it looks hard, but I should.
We'll make sure that we can have a definition of undesirable.
It would seem that you don't really want to put that in at all. Right.
Right, that's why the.
Yeah.
You don't really want to remove that, if somebody come out.
There are trees.
You don't like it, but it's sort of commercially available, so. I should go look at it.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's, look, maybe I'll pull some together some stuff for that for next week, so we can talk about that a little bit more, so we make sure that.
Right, you know, I understand what why we're using it in this terminology, but we're gonna have a regulation, something that's a little more. Dominant, I guess, you know, you don't call that or you can-
Yeah, we can call them for
Can
So you mean like everywhere, in every way, or just in development? In development?
do development.
In development,
You
yes.
can't go through the.
Right.
I mean, something, but that was my question, is can you do that? That gets a little bit. Yeah. That's not, but no. But yeah, like as far as.
These can't be part of your landscape plan.
Yes, and that would be the idea.
Or the undesirable list.
Yeah.
Something.
For developers, I think it makes perfect sense to just say,
Don't.
not use these.
Yeah.
You can say you should, but you still can't. But you say you can't, then you can't.
Yeah.
Right.
I would love to just say, no, I'm thinking of it,
Yeah.
like, make it clear, no.
Yeah, just explicitly say these are ones.
Yeah.
Use. I mean, we're doing it, we're doing the homeowners a favor.
I mean, we just heard what they said, you know, your ordinance says must shall.
We can must shall.
Yes.
Will.
Or shall not.
They will point it out if it just.
I mean, I know it's on the DNR and just more a comment or food for thought and future as we think about the ways township engages with the community. It could be something that might be a helpful link to have tagged just on the township website, even for residents, right? They're not gonna be bound by the tree ordinance on their individual property that they already own, but we could certainly make it a little easier for them if they're seeking
I like that idea.
Yeah.
options for what they would like to plant on.
I would have loved to have this before I put all this.
Yeah, the thing out of a company post, you know, from Parks and their. All on Facebook. But, yeah, I don't know if it's possible, just as a kind of community helpful links, right? Like.
I think we can add a trees page.
Yeah.
I would be.
Well, yeah.
But I think we can add it. I don't think so, you get crash more expecting that to be more activity for it.
Thanks for that, input, everybody. I think, we got one more item, which was.
Yes, so this is information, Dan, you were just asking a minute ago, who does the landscape thing? It's the planning commission. And then, which has been finally approved by the township board or something like this. Many years ago, who, do you remember here with the preserve? Okay, so I don't think anybody here was on the planning commission and then went through. Getting the final pieces on the reserves of Connecticut Tower, which is a development that is, on the north side, which is at the very east edge of the township. It's kind of kitty corner south from, Van Hardware. Is that the right one? That's the north side.
Yeah.
And then it's off of Division on the west. So there was a sidewalk that just finally went in, this spring, and a little pocket park there was approved as well. When they put it in, they changed some of the plantings, they downsized it pretty significantly, the plantings, saying that it wasn't drought tolerant enough. So we talked about it a little bit, and they upsized the planting plan again. So, it matches what was approved to begin with. But it is different. So this was and it's a much less formal drawing. This was what was in the original approval. And the revision is here. So it's about the same size, it flashed out the planting. Site plan approvals, the staff is able to make, approvals of minor amendments so that they don't have to come back and talk to you guys when they want to change one bush out for another. So this was kind of in that category, and then our responsibility is to notify you that that was something that happened. So this is something that happened. We also said that it was okay for them to start installation in September rather than making it started last month, so that hopefully they'll survive.
All right. Let's see, we can take this to staff reports.
The RFP for the zoning ordinance rewrite will go out tomorrow, so that is in the works. I believe we're gonna be looking at putting together a subcommittee, so Tom and I are gonna talk more about that, but we will need some. I think we're probably looking at maybe 2 planning commission members to sit on that subcommittee. So the way that would work is that the subcommittee would be working most closely, aside from staff, with the consultant on this. And then the planning commission will be getting regular updates and reviewing things regularly as a whole. But by having the subcommittees, that would help move things around just a little bit faster. So looking to have membership from the planning commission and the ZBA and the board all on the subcommittee. That's kind of a tentative plan, but that's the direction it's moving right now. The first step of the process is going to be a technical audit of the zoning ordinance. So they'll go through and they'll say, this is what we found. Here are the things that are out of date. Here are the things that are contradictory. Here are the things that are using language that we people understand anymore. All those sorts of things. So that's what that first step. And then they'll also identify areas where the ordinance is just kind of out of date. They'll look at our development processes. Some of those are good, some of them need a little bit of work on streamline. So that'll be the first phase, and then it'll go into kind of so I think those are the big things. Dave, you are the last meeting. Well, yes. I don't know if you wanted to update on.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because regular CBA wasn't there. So there was me and Dave Finance was also an alternate. And then we had 2 regular CBA members that usually keep up to nothing. So we had 6 items before us, which is exceptional, I guess. I don't know. The middle one. And several of them referred or regarding accessory buildings, which we approved all of those. And one was a small building, and it was kind of shoved into the only place was in the corner of one lot. The guy had a single stock garage and no basement, no storage, so we approved that. A couple of them were for larger accessory buildings. And they were on acreage, and they were wooded and included, and they did a nice job presenting. Those were approved. We had apartments over on Auto Beach Road that was built and approved for 59 units. They built 60, used one as an office. They wanted to convert the office to an apartment and denied that. There's a lot of reasons why. There was another accessory building that was requested. Well, some of you remember we went through a height requirement.
Yes.
And this was 11 feet higher than what the requirement allowed, and bigger, it was a smaller lot, so we denied that. Okay, representative said I kind of thought so.
Okay, well, we just,
Yeah, we did this.
Then there was, one house up in,
The auto use district.
yeah, those are tiny lots, there's a overlay and different zoning ordinances, and they wanted to add a garage and minimize the side lot. It all seems to be, not invasive on any of the neighbors or anything like that, so. Great, I walked out there feeling pretty good about that. Great to see. Nice to find, so.
Very good, thank you. Sharon, what's up with what you worried about?
So, we had rather a light meeting this past month and 2 weeks ago. So filled our time with 4 presentations. 2 of the highlights, we got the fabulous job with her proclamation and recognition of Venice. He and his wife had come and, yeah, it was beautiful. It was just a very short reading of his accomplishments and, that was very nice.
What you guys said about.
Check the recording, I'll watch it. It's fun. And then we learned about, a new software we purchased. It's called Placer AI. And what it does is use GPS on phones. Everybody knows we get tracked everywhere we go. You've got a phone. And what was demonstrated was our pickleball courts. And over the course of the last year, we've had over 24,000 visitors. It's a total accumulation, it's not individual. But the interesting point is we could compare that to other areas because this data is all gathered from everywhere. Our pickleball courts are patronized more than anything else in this area, even above the pickleball courts in Holland. So we've got a beautiful amenity there. The purpose behind the software is to aid us in getting more grants so we can develop more things for our community. And I look forward to seeing what other data we can extract. One item with regard to over safety education, there has been 2 classes already for kids. There's one more this Saturday. I don't know if it's filled yet or not, but Chief Danby, it was in his report. It's Saturday all day, 9 to 5. It is at the fire station on Perry Street as opposed to our rescue center that's currently going through some renovations. But just a great opportunity for kids to learn. So if you know of anybody that's interested, get their Chief. That's all I got. You don't?
One thing I learned from Chief Danby is that if you were born, I think it's after 1979, is further back, I didn't realize you're not even supposed to drive a jet ski without having taken motor safety in Michigan. So this is a free class.
Oh yeah, and it is free.
It's not, my kids did it. It was not, they were not excited about it. It's also a Saturday in the summer, but it was a good class and it's a good safety thing for them to have.
I remember my dad putting me through snowmobile class, which was also an entire Saturday. But for our area, it's very pertinent. That's all it is.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, let's see, I don't think we have any other, the other organizations that we do reports. One thing I wanted to just ask, because this came up in last meeting, I thought it was a great idea, I wasn't sure how it gets started or who we get. But I think, Shar, you brought up, I think you talked, Stephanie, you were talking about how to engage more younger people, and I think you had brought up the connected with the high school, scouting, I think you mentioned. That could be pretty cool. I'm not sure who would own it, how it gets started, how do you connect? Is that is it board staff, is it something we do? I don't know. I think we'd have to figure out what it is we would want to offer or engage on. But I think it could be really interesting, a great way to get other people to understand what happens in township, the organization. How they work.
Yeah, my notes that are piled on my kitchen table, I realized we have 4 piles, many different piles and they have no kitchen. So, anyway, do recycle something for that. I will try to find the business card from the gentleman that I talked to with regard to that and see if he's got an outline and then we take it.
Anybody else have any other, old business, new business, that we want to lay out? Entertaining. Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Thanks, everybody.